Hello, thank you very much, Karin, for coming on board and giving your reflections for urban talks around COVID-19 and the future of our cities. You kindly participated in 2 Silk Cities conferences and contributed to 2 of our books, and it's great to have you here on a very important question on density in our cities. Now that we have this social distancing, and at the same time, we know that cities are associated with density. So how we bring these 2 together if we can. Thank you again, and over to you.
Okay, thank you very much, Farnas, for the invitation. I'm very happy that I can present some of my thoughts on the consequences of the COVID-19 pandemic on city planning. My opinion, even if we overcome this epidemic, it's almost certain that another one will occur in the next years. Why I think this will happen, I will explain a little later. In any case, I think it makes sense to reflect the consequences of such a crisis for the conception of cities. I have prepared a presentation and I will try to show it now. Yeah, hopefully this is visible. COVID-19 has shaken some certainties, such as our ideas of the dense city. On the one hand, it requires caution to keep a distance to potential carriers of the virus. On the other hand, it is precisely the density of interactions that makes the city what it is. So I have difficult, yes, it works. Since the spread of the corona pandemic, the model of the dense city has often been questioned and criticized. We are facing a seemingly insoluble dilemma. Being close to other people is dangerous at the moment, for some even deadly. And we can see that the virus hits cities much harder than the countryside, which is certainly due to the number of social contacts and physical interactions. The problem is that these interactions are the essence of the city. Cities are made for communication, for networking, for the exchange of as many people as possible, as many goods and services as possible. Cities are economic hubs, focal points of cultural life, centers of government and administration. Life here must pulsate, otherwise it's not a city. Of course, many of the direct interactions have been replaced by digital communication in recent years, and even more so in recent weeks. But we see how important the physical contact between people is for their well-being and mental health. We have noticed this very clearly in the time of home offices, remote teaching and distance learning. Therefore, the density of communication and relationships is linked to a corresponding density of the built environment. From an economic perspective, the city must be dense, otherwise stores and services cannot flourish. From an ecological point of view, the city has to be dense too, because this reduces the distances people have to travel to their workplaces, to schools and shops and places of leisure activities, etc. This reduces traffic and, as a consequence, energy consumption and CO2 emissions. But now the dense city is being questioned again, as it was in the 1920s, when it was also rejected on health and hygienic grounds. So here you have some images of how dense cities look like, whether they are in the east or in the west. So that's an important factor of the characteristic of cities in general. In the Middle Ages, the narrow streets, the many people living close together, and the lack of sanitary facilities had turned the cities into breeding grounds for diseases and epidemics such as the plague. Those who could fled to the countryside, as we can learn from Giovanni Boccaccio's collection of novels Il Decamerone. The content in a nutshell is 10 wealthy young people leave the city of Florence, which was struck by the plague in 1348, I think, retire to a country house in the hills outside Florence and pass the time there in the countryside telling stories. Doesn't this remind us of the current situation? I know many Viennese who have moved to the countryside all summer long to their weekend houses or to their parents or other relatives to work from their home offices there, where they were less exposed to the dangers of the pandemic. So the question is, will this bring about a renaissance of country life? In the course of industrialization, when people flocked to the big cities in search of work, overcrowded and unhygienic neighborhoods emerged again in which diseases such as tuberculosis, cholera, and others spread. Le Corbusier detested the medieval urban fabric and these cramped quarters. In the 1920s, as we know, like many other modernist architects, he propagated a city full of light and air instead of the narrow old town, and he planned extensive new housing developments with lots of greens in between. Il faut tuer la rue corridor, he said. It's necessary to kill the street corridor, this type of street which is bordered and enclosed by walls on both sides like a corridor. And instead, he proposed the park-like city, extensive green spaces with buildings that are elevated from the ground on stilts or piles and arranged at large distances from each other. For 40 years, this was the canonical concept. Light, space, greenery, and the division of functions into residential, work, leisure, and traffic. But then the non-spatial, uncomfortable character of these city layouts was criticized by Aldo van Eyck, one of the most important spokesmen of Team 10 and the Dutch structuralists. He argued that architecture and urbanism is about creating interiors, both outdoors and indoors. For half a century, architects have been providing outside for men, even inside, but that is not their job at all. Their job is to provide inside for men, even outside. That's what Aldo van Eyck wrote in the forum. Most of the interwar projects that were based on the desire for a healthier city were not realized, but after World War II, the sprawling urban projects reappeared as car-friendly cities. In terms of epidemics, this may be ideal, no densely populated public squares, but streets where everyone moves separately in his own car. So again, the question is, will detached single-family homes return along with the car-friendly urban planning? Or at least the gated community with its townhouses? I think ecologically, economically, and socially, that would really be a disaster. So if we don't want to throw all the planning principles of recent years overboard, how can we react to this threat? What does the new situation mean for the design of public spaces? For some time in April this year, people were only allowed to leave their homes to buy food, go to the doctor, or to look after other people. And when the curfew was relaxed, everyone went out to enjoy the spring sun. Many preferred to go by bicycle instead of public transportation, and bicycle traffic nearly doubled in Vienna compared to the same period last year. And since retail stores and restaurants and also some federal gardens were still closed, people stayed mainly on the streets and in the smaller parks. So it often turned out that the public space was too small, too limited to keep the necessary distance to other people and accommodate all the bicycle traffic. So how can we deal with this lack of public space, return to the park-like city? My personal suggestion would be to ban motorized private transport from the city as radically as possible. Public spaces would suddenly gain tremendously in quality. There would be plenty of space available for other uses in times of epidemics to keep sufficient distance from each other, in normal times to meet, to play, to hang out, and so on. In Vienna, there have been a few initiatives by the city administration to reorganize traffic and adapt it to the new situation. Some pop-up lanes were opened by the Green Vice Mayor and City Councillor for Traffic, Birgit Hebein. You see her here on the photo. One of these lanes on an important inner city street, Praterstraße. This means that motorized traffic was locally and temporarily downgraded in favor of cycling. The Green Party has been campaigning for years to expand the network of cycle paths. Now was the opportunity to test what was possible. Of course, this immediately provoked criticism from the motorist lobby, and conservative politicians accused Hebein of abusing the corona crisis for ideological planning games and spoke of transport policy nonsense that would lead to chaos and endless traffic jams. Of course, the opposite was the case. No traffic jam at all, and the majority of people was really happy. In the Scandinavian countries, they are much more advanced and have already created great and very efficient cycling infrastructures years ago, real cycle highways. What's interesting, in transport planning and policy, it's now mostly city governments led by women that dare to ban car traffic from the city and instead lay out cycle paths and plant trees. Two examples: Manuela Carmena, who was mayor of Madrid from June 2015 to June 2019, tried to reduce air pollution in the center of Madrid by banning most of the private cars. Or the socialist Anne Hidalgo, mayor of Paris since 2014. The city also has a massive air pollution problem, so she too is planning to reduce car traffic. She converted the Riverside Road along the Seine into a pedestrian promenade. And in the course of the coronavirus measures, the city government also planned cycle highways parallel to important subway lines. This was first only intended as a temporary alternative to car traffic and to these notoriously congested subway, but it will remain as a permanent measure. And the space for cars will be reduced even further. 60,000 parking spaces are to disappear, and 170,000 trees are to be planted. We must say that the theory of the traffic planner and professor of traffic science, Hermann Knoflacher, here from Vienna, has proven to be correct again and again. He says, well-built, wide roads do not make car traffic more fluid because they attract car drivers, and in the end, there's the same traffic jam. But if, on the contrary, you make driving unattractive and walking and cycling attractive, it has the desired effect of reducing car traffic jams. I forgot to show this nice bicycle and pedestrian areas along the Seine. So here he is, Hermann Knoflacher, the spiritual father of Vienna's largely car-free inner city. To illustrate the negative effects of the car on public space, he invented the Gehzeug, literally walking stuff. This is a play on words. In German, vehicle literally means driving stuff. The walking stuff that you can see here is a wooden frame the size of a normal middle-class car. He walked around a lot with this frame and in this way made immediately clear how absurdly much space a car takes up. And subsequently, the frame has been carried around a lot at demonstrations all over the world because it really shows very clearly, very impressively how much space cars take away from children to play or to be used by sustainable means of transport such as bicycles, while the car turns public space into a life-threatening and unhealthy environment. And what's also interesting in light of the current situation, one of his books is entitled Virus Auto. He compares the car to a virus. A virus manipulates the cell it infects so that the cell no longer works for the organism, but only for the virus and reproduces its genetic information. The same thing happens to human society. The society no longer plans and builds cities for people, but only for cars. And in this way, the environment becomes inhospitable for the people and they can have no advantage at all from the use of the car. Experience has shown if the means of transport become faster, the time we spend traveling a distance will not decrease. We invest the same time and our distances become longer. For example, we drive longer distances to buy the same things in supermarkets at the periphery that we would find in the small store around the corner where we can go on foot. The problem with this is that high speeds destroy small structures. If there are no more stores in the vicinity, you have to drive further, and in this way the car changes the economic structure, the urban structure, and also social relationships. So I think it's really time to reclaim the pedestrian-friendly city. It would be a great gain for all times, for normal everyday life, and for times when we are plagued by epidemics. And in my opinion, we must seriously overcome the functionalist city by rethinking the separation of functions, creating more mixed uses in the districts, and significantly reducing the need for mobility over longer distances. In short, we must create the city of short distances. At the beginning, I explained that density is a characteristic of the city, and I listed the advantages of a dense city. This statement has to be differentiated a little. Of course, we also need green spaces for recreation and for ecological services, for example, for the improvement of the city climate, for the regulation of the urban water balance, for oxygen production, and so on. Recreational areas in or near the city, which are easily accessible by public transport or by bicycle, also contribute to the reduction of leisure and excursion traffic and help to cope with the density of the city, which can sometimes also be quite exhausting. So I would like to give another example from Vienna, an open green space in the center of the city, which proved to be very important for health and mental well-being during the Corona period. The Donauinsel, the Danube Island. It was one of the best planning decisions of the last 100 years, I think. It's an artificial island built between 1972 and 1988, rather narrow, as you can see, but about 20 kilometers long. and it's located between the old Danube and a new artificial river arm, the new Danube, and it's part of the Viennese flood protection system and also serves as a local recreation area. The northern and southern parts of the island are conceived as nature reserves with a lot of ecological niche for all kinds of rare species. The central part is arranged like a park and offers many sports facilities, restaurants, bars, clubs, and so on. Every year, the 3-day Danube Island Festival takes place here, which attracts about 3 million people. It can be reached by underground, and you can imagine how much this large green area reduces the leisure and excursion traffic by car. It's more important than ever today to enjoy fresh air, to do sports, to swim in the Danube, and still keep the necessary distance to other people. Smaller parks, unfortunately, in the neighborhoods were often too crowded. This shows that in the future, more attention must be paid to these spaces which are close to the apartments. Another consideration, do we have to rethink our concepts for housing? During the weeks when we were more or less locked up in our apartments, everyone was happy whose apartment was big enough to house the home office, to provide space for homeschooling, and also enough retreats for all the family members so that they didn't get on each other's nerves when they spent the whole week together without interruption. A balcony or terrace was a special luxury. But does this all have to be a luxury? Should it not be a matter of course? Apartments are becoming smaller and smaller, and overcrowding is also increasing significantly. The front runner is Paris, where statistically 30% of apartments on the outskirts of the city are reportedly overcrowded, and the trend is still rising. But the corona statistics show that it is primarily the low-income part of the population that is affected, and this obviously has to do with overcrowded housing. Rents and property prices are rising, the demand for living space is rising, the real estate industry is responding with small apartments, including furniture that can be opened up. This is a trend and appears to be a viable solution to save space and money. A rental apartment as large as a hotel suite with a kitchen hidden in a cupboard, a bed that folds out over a retractable desk, and so on. These smart apartments may be really smart when you only need them for a few hours a day. But during the pandemic, such a minimum cell might be really claustrophobic. The French architects Lacadon Vassal have pointed out alternatives. They built open, low-tech structures reduced to a few columns and floor slabs and installations shafts, so they can build larger structures at the same cost. They offer not only programmed space, living room, bedroom, children's room, bathroom, and so on, but also additional space that is free for use, space that can be appropriated according to the wishes and needs of the residents. Partition walls can be added later, the fret can be rearranged. They use this concept also for the conversion of rundown apartment blocks from the 1960s. As you can see here, this is one example from Bordeaux. Since elements of industrial greenhouse systems are used for these additional rooms, they may not be usable all year round as they have no thermal insulation, but they do allow for a spacious and airy feeling of space. Maybe we have to put on a sweater again instead of sitting on the sofa in a t-shirt in winter, but we won't be claustrophobic until the next quarantine. And we can maybe better adapt the space to various changing living conditions. One should actually also talk what negative consequences it has when the housing market only concentrates on individual housing and neglects community facilities and loses sight of the concept of a functioning district. But I think I will skip that question because there's not enough time for that. Is the city now going completely digital? That's another interesting question. I would like to address two aspects. The pandemic has accelerated digitization and will accelerate it even further. This is clear. Smart technology is used by the authorities everywhere to track patient contacts and gain control over the epidemic. In the newspapers, we could read that in Wuhan, a digital platform connected to an app combined personal data with big data. And this kind of contact tracing has worked well because the Chinese are used to organizing almost their entire everyday life with apps on their cell phones. With WeChat, for example, they make cashless payments, they buy tickets for trips and events, they book medical appointments and much more. Very comfortable. But the app is state-owned and they are therefore completely controlled by the government. WeChat passes almost all data to the Chinese authorities. In the future, the identity card can be linked to the WeChat account, or it is already linked to it. And by connecting this data with surveillance cameras in public places and face recognition, the state will know about every single step and action of its citizens. But that does not seem to worry the Chinese very much. That's of course different in Europe. Contact tracing apps are not readily accepted by people in there. At least I know that for Austria. Throughout history, healthcare and state surveillance of citizens have always gone hand in hand. Now, however, the tools for this have been substantially refined, and there is a danger that epidemics could be misused to extend control over citizens everywhere. Therefore, we have to be really careful and weigh up the benefits and risks against each other. Some cities have already reacted to this development of citizen control and have forbidden face recognition by government agencies, San Francisco, for example. So I think we must consider how to resist this total control that is paving the way from a democracy to a totalitarian regime. It's really a scary and a dangerous situation. A second aspect of digitization, we all agree that digital tools and media that enable users to network on the internet play a crucial role in communication, especially in times when physical distance is required. I don't know how we would have handled the corona situation 20 years earlier when these tools were not available. But I believe that some expectations and predictions regarding digital communication are simply wrong. Some argue that social media would largely replace real encounters. It is more comfortable to sit at home and chat with a friend than to meet him in a bar. This, in my opinion, turned out to be wrong. We have seen how eager people are to meet each other physically, hang out together, have parties together. After the lockdown, consumption has been very tentative and hesitant to start up because many were still scared or have lost the fun of shopping or have noticed how many things one does not really need. But physical encounters, these were felt to be indispensable. This again speaks for a city of short distances where these encounters can easily take place without the need to travel far. It speaks for a well-designed public space which is homely, and aesthetically pleasing. So I come to my final consideration. Is there a systemic connection between the causes of the climate crisis and the causes of the pandemic? The UNN wildlife market in China is currently suspected to be the epicenter of the coronavirus, which probably originates from bats and was transmitted to humans via these wild animals. What's striking is that the majority of the new diseases that have appeared in the last 50 years have been transmitted from animals to humans. AIDS, Ebola, SARS, bird flu, swine flu, and so on. I think that this phenomenon is the result of human intrusion into increasingly remote areas of the planet. For good reason, we call the present geological epoch Anthropocene. The human species intervenes in all areas of nature, disturbs the natural balance, severely affects the natural evolution, in most cases to his own disadvantage, we must say. Since natural habitats are increasingly being pushed back and taken over, exploited and fundamentally changed by humans, it should come as no surprise that in return, the oppressed creatures and participants in nature, viruses are not living beings in the strict sense, that they in return infiltrate the territories claimed by humans. For example, meanwhile, there are more leopards living in Mumbai than in the surrounding nature reserves, or special species of mosquitoes developed in London subway tunnels and benefit from the blood of the commuters. And COVID-19 viruses have spread to humans. Of course, people need more and more living space and resources due to the exponential global population growth. But since the Industrial Revolution, we have also been very wasteful with space and resources. So if we want to survive, if we want to avoid climate change and the resulting problems, such as the uninhabitability of large areas of the globe, famine, and massive migratory movements, we must immediately switch from a linear to a circular economy. Oh, sorry. So I think that climate change and the danger of epidemics can, or rather must, be fought with the same strategies. Restrict the further expansion of the human living space, reuse what is already there, reuse the built environment, material, adapt and reuse existing buildings, reuse and transform existing neighborhoods, and promote local economy with short transport distances to save energy, to cut CO2 emissions, and to avoid spread of diseases. So all these things will work together and hopefully help us overcome the challenging next years. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Karin. It was fascinating. You mentioned a number of points, and it was interesting to see the density, the dense being dense, was repeated in different forms, from digitally dense, which we can see in many countries, in many advanced smart cities now, and the threat that we may have in future, in a short future actually. And I really liked your start point with Le Corbusier's modern cities, you know, and the danger that, you know, we might go there again with the excuse of COVID-19 and this reliance of private transport, mode of transportation. And my question for you, and again, your radical suggestion was fascinating because, completely ban all private cars in a city, which again, to me, it's kind of addresses the size of the city and brings those traditional way of thinking about neighborhoods, about amenities that you also mentioned. One thing that it was also repeated in all your talks was about open spaces. So from the island, from the Danube Island, from festivals, from well-designed open spaces that are functional and that can be used in different occasions. So I just wanted, because you mentioned your radical suggestion, I wanted to share my radical, actually, suggestion with you to see what you think. During this pandemic, we saw a rise of open space activities. We saw birthday parties in parks. Mm-hmm. We saw open space theaters, they are coming back, basically. Mm-hmm. We are learning to use more our open spaces. So what do you think, for example, of having conferences in open spaces? Having, having other kind of, having cinemas, yes, schools, in many rural areas around the world, we have open space schools. So this is my, actually, maybe it can complement your radical suggestion and to give the balance of nature and cities and built environment that you mentioned in the final part of your talk. This is one radical suggestion. Do you think that we can go there? Do you think that this kind of thinking, different ways of thinking, banning all cars, bringing different functions to open spaces, how long does it take to change the principles of how we think about our cities?
Well, I think it's really necessary to have a quick change, yeah, and we see that many cities around the world are trying hard to do that transition from a car-friendly city to a pedestrian-friendly city. And I really think that we can do a lot of things in the open space, or at least there have been also buildings which are kind of intermediate thing between a closed space in the traditional sense and an open sense. Think of the famous Galleria in Milano, yeah? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you also have these spaces in London, a lot of these glass-covered streets which are lined with shops, but they could also accommodate, let's say, school spaces, university spaces, restaurants, and all kinds of things. They are could be well ventilated, but they provide protection against rain. So we could accommodate a lot of schools. And I remember of the famous Openlucht school in Amsterdam, for example, yeah, which was an experiment in the 1920s when many people suffered from lung diseases, and the only method to heal these diseases or to somehow provide a protection against them was to expose people to open air. And this was a school which had, I think, three floors, and on each of these floors, 2 classrooms were situated with which were closed by glass facades, but there was a third one which was a kind of covered open terrace where people were taught, children were taught in the open air. of course, they had to wear warm coats and so on, but why not? This could be possible. And I think we should take up these great ideas and reactivate them again.
Thank you very much. I agree with you. I agree with you. So maybe at the next Silk Cities conference will be in Park.
Oh, yeah. I'm looking forward to that. Actually, I'm in the lucky situation that I have a balcony and enjoyed the times when we were in quarantine, that I could sit on my balcony with WLAN and I worked from there all day long. Huh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a luxury actually. That's a luxury. Thanks again, Karin. I know that each of the points that you mentioned, they deserve to have a separate urban talk for them. And I really hope to see you again and to have your support again. Thanks a lot.
Pleasure. Bye, Fanas. Bye-bye.